So years ago, how did we get into this? When we got married, I don't know if you guys heard this in our story, but I went through a divorce in ministry, which, in some places that's treated more or less the same as being a pedophile or, other really horrible things. To be a divorced pastor was not something in the movement we were part of that's very common or very accepted, and I didn't accept it either, but it happened. And so I found myself, weirdly, a divorced pastor that was continuing to pastor. And then we got together and got married. And when we got married, I decided to turn my church over to the youth pastor, and they pastored it up until this time last year. They just have resigned the church and handed it over. But out of that, another church plant came. There's all the good things that happened. But anyway, coming into marriage, when we got married, I said, you know what, I think probably that Deuteronomy, I should be free at home, in the sense that we need to simplify our life and really pour into our marriage. And so we began to read marriage books to one another. And the goal was, we knew half of first marriages fail, 3/4 of second marriages fail. And we knew that we're bringing so much mess. She has a mom that was married
4 times.
4 times. My dad would have been married maybe 12. I don't know. But nobody would have him after the 3rd, I think. So anyway, we didn't really have models of what good marriage looked like. And even the people with the best models, it still is very unique to their personality sometimes. And so we have people sitting in front of us all the time at Marble that can't figure out why they can't make their marriage work the way their parents did. But when you find out the personality mix, it was quite different. And so different skills are needed. So we started reading marriage books to one another. And then we had a small group class that I was teaching at the Bible college. And this one girl who was daughter of one of the prominent pastors in Southern California, she kept telling her dad, there's this couple that teach my small groups class, and you should have them come teach the marriage thing. And he called me up, and I'm like, hey, I'm the divorce pastor, right? I don't know, do you want us to come, teach marriages? And he's like, I know, could you just not talk about that too much? But, okay, I think we could, maybe our church would be able to handle that, And so what happened is, as we read these 22 books to each other, we said that it's not about what we're reading, but it's the conversations we have around what we're reading. So we might sometimes read a sentence and then spend 2 hours talking about it. We had about 2 hours a day that we could do that while I was a professor. And then when we first were asked to do that, this list came together. We said, what are the things that helped us the most? Well, it's gone through some revisions, but the initial version of this was what we used at that initial marriage thing. We've done a lot of marriage things since. They've been asked pretty often. And that's kind of what this grew out of. But then our focus has been on caring for pastor marriages. And so these are some basic concepts, but then we've also really learned, some of the specifics of how to do that in pastoral marriages. Like, what are the unique challenges of ministry marriages? So it's the same things that are, tremendous help, like Gottman's materials on communication. I mean, those are fantastic. Good communication will not save your marriage, but it helps you to reduce the amount of damage you're doing to one another for no good reason, to learn to communicate much more healthy. There already has to be that emotional connection. There has to be, there's other things like emotionally focused therapy and things like that that can help marriages be healthier when the hurt's really deep. But still, Gottman's materials are fantastic. And we find that a lot of pastors are really bad at communication. It's another one of these mysteries like forgiveness. There's people that make their money as communicators sometimes have some of the worst internal communication in their marriage. Part of it's the 365, 7 days a week, glass house, always under pressure, a job that never ends, and so they short circuit each other all the time. Everybody's like, there's shorthand ways to get everything done because nobody has time to actually spend in actual deep communication. And so the second thing I want to hand out, sorry about that.
While he's doing that, snap a picture of this with your phone.
Oh yeah, go ahead and talk about it.
This is so simple. It probably feels overly simple.
Thank you.
But if you struggle with trying to control other people or other people trying to control you or boundaries, this is your sweet spot. Because then you hold everything up against Can I evoke a change in this? You're responsible for the blue. Can you be responsible for how others take care of themselves? You cannot. Are you responsible for the past? You are not. Can you change it? Nope. How about the future? Okay, do you see what I'm saying? If you just look at this, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it in your car, remind yourself, this is my responsibility, not the rest of that. Okay, that saves a lot of problems in marriage too, by the way.
You can drop a lot of your own things in there as something's, is this in my yard or this is not in my yard? So the second tool I gave you there is one of those things that you can control. And what Harley, he's one of the great writers about marriage. You know, he's got his needs, her needs, you know, version 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that book's been written and written. What's that?
We ran out.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Of these right here, the calendar. Why do we have to have this? We know what's on here.
Here's one more.
Two more. Yeah. 1, 2. Oh, the couples are not sharing well. Is that what we're having happen here?
I'm sorry. We
okay. Yes.
We underestimated how much marriage trouble there is. So.
No, we didn't. No.
One of the things that we found really interesting with pastoral marriages, as Harley discovered that a typical marriage that's really healthy has about 15 hours a week of uninterrupted time. And it says on the back of that sheet, you know, like what that is, the one with the calendar thing on it. And then on the front of the sheet is a place that we often ask pastors, show us how much time you guys spend together in uninterrupted, couple time. And we have found this very common, especially pastors of larger churches. Well, smaller was too, sometimes even worse with smaller, for different reasons. Often 2 or 3 hours a week is they'll go, well, we have a date night some weeks, and we're like, okay, what else? No uninterrupted time, no time to talk, no time to communicate, no time to care about each other's souls, to get into each other's lives. And so many of us, if we worked a job that's 8 to 5 and we had the weekends and 4-day weekends and 3-day weekends and all that, pastors don't have any of that. They never get a 2-day weekend, much less a 3-day or 4-day weekend. Many of them don't take vacation, especially here would be the smaller churches, not smaller pastors, but the churches, situations where they're having to cover so many of the various roles themselves. And so just challenging them that 15 hours.
Really fast.
Yes,
Could
of
I,
course.
for all those people filled with anxiety who feel like it has to be face to face, I need to talk to you about this time.
Right.
It is not that.
She likes to text me.
He is the one in our family that says, I need to talk to you about something. And my stomach, okay, that's not what we're talking about, okay? We're talking about, you connect like this, but it can be walking around the block. It can be watching a movie together without your phones out. It can be any kind of engagement over a cup of coffee in the morning, sharing your devotions. So it doesn't sound as unattainable and unreachable way out there as it is. You do have more time than you do if you put your phone away. And that is the bottom line.
Yeah, one of the thank you, great interruption. No, interrupt all, please. Yeah. They would cheer if you interrupt, I'm sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we found was kind of a best practice. I learned that in some of the work I was studying under Mike, is called a couple staff meeting. That may be the one marriage tool that we've had someone will bump into, because we used to care for people, we'd then bump into them later at conferences and things, and they would say, couple staff meeting, changed our life, And what we said was, hey, do you ever talk about something at 11 o'clock at night about the elders or the deacons or, and then nobody sleeps and it's horrible. And so a couple staff meeting is you pick a time every week. Oftentimes we suggest at a coffee shop or a restaurant where you have to contain yourself a little bit and be nice. And you come prepared to have trouble, to solve problems. The same thing you do in a church staff meeting. We're here to analyze, solve problems, delegate, figure out the calendar, all that. And so we suggest about a 2-hour staff meeting. We've had a lot of couples where one's a teacher or something, but they found a way they could drive and have lunch, or they get childcare that's set up every week, and they know they get these 2 hours away to solve problems. And then you try to contain all your problems into maybe a note on your phone, so that during the week when things hit you and you think, I need to talk to my husband, I need to talk to my wife, we need to solve this at church, we need to do this. Instead, just put those in there, and then if it can wait till Tuesday at lunch when you have your couple staff meeting, sit down, you're eye to eye, you say, here's my top thing. We need to get our wills updated or whatever. And then you work through it. And if you can't come to the same page, and once you've discussed it, you go, time out. You know what? We're going to be meeting next Tuesday. This thing can wait till next Tuesday. Let's just both pray about it all week and see if we get any better solutions by next Tuesday. So you contain conflict and trouble that's hard to solve and saying hard things that are hard to hear into a protected space where everybody's arriving, expecting, and they're ready for that. And then you save the rest of the week for laughter and walks and connection and date night. And you don't let that stuff come into date night at all. You go, that's Tuesday stuff. No date night. Date night's for romance. And so anyway, that particular little technique has helped so many pastors.
So if you take a look, Gottman has done tons of research on couples in crisis and conflict. One of the questions I like to ask each member of the couple is, how'd your parents process conflict? And I can't tell you the numbers of people who say, I never saw my parents fight, not once. And I think, wow, that's not good. In case you're wondering, that's not the right answer, okay? That is not the right answer. So ideally, Gottman figured out a 5-to-1 positive comments, loving touch, kind gesture, thoughtful gesture, 5-to-1 hard thing. So your culture of your home is mostly positive and thoughtful. And how about some good manners, right? Can we just have good manners with our spouse every now and then? Treat them with the same kindness that we treat the 7-Eleven checkout person, right? Let's just start there. Keep the bar low. So one of the things we like to do is pull out, do we have that? Did we hand out the horseman? Oh, no, we have the horseman, don't we? So
they're right here.
Gottman got his grad students together, put couples in a lab, and had them process an ongoing big conflict. They're going around the mountain 50 times a year about this one thing. They cannot agree on it. And they figured out there are 4, he's a Jewish researcher, so it's ironic that he used the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse, okay? So he noticed 4 things that, and correct these percentages, I often get these incorrect, and within, I think, 93% accuracy, could predict whether or not that couple would still be married in 7 years if any of these relationship dynamics were present.
And the 5-to-1 ratio, and then
yeah,
a few other things
you
that
add
he noticed.
some of those things in. Yes, that's exactly right. And so we often pull these out and say, okay, so criticism.
By the way, the 5-to-1 is the minimum.
It is.
It's like anything below that starts to move into headed toward divorce range. And so it can go all the way to 13-to-1 is what some other data discovered, that if you're doing 13 touches, kind words, loving embraces for every one sort of dig, then
Which we'll have.
It's even better, yeah.
Okay, so criticism was one. So you verbally attack your partner's character. So it's not like, would you mind taking out the trash? Sure, I'll be happy to take out the trash. 3 days later, So I want you to know the trash is still sitting there, and you never take out the trash when I ask you. You never follow through on the things that are important to me. Okay, you see the criticism there? You could see why that is not a positive thing. So one of the antidotes to that, as you note on your sheet, I think it's on the back page. But okay, yeah, go ahead and shut that.
I was just going to say on the front here, the top two are especially antidotes for criticism. That's number 3 and number 4. Number 5 and number 6 are especially antidotes for contempt. Number 7 and 8 are especially antidotes for defensiveness, and number 9 and 10 are especially helpful with stonewalling.
So
There
we
are
just
more
listed-
antidotes, and
yeah,
they
of course.
aren't exactly aimed
Yeah.
at only one thing, but that kind of gives you
Yes.
the tools that can help
So
lower
there's
those
the
four,
four.
one of those
Yeah.
4 areas.
So there's the 4. The first one's criticism. The second one is contempt. And you kind of know what I'm talking about. You know those people who sort of have that, yes, I see that hand. We do, but we don't have enough for everyone. So I apologize for that. But we can, listen, we could so quickly do a list of a link or something like that, could we not? You're the tech man, so you get to decide if it would be quickly or not. Oh, one of those. Is it one of these that you're wanting? Okay, anyway, long story short, here we go.
They have this.
Contempt is attacking that person's sense of worth with kind of an arrogance and superiority. You know what I'm talking
A
about.
sneer, a roll of the eye.
Yes, it's not pretty. Okay, the third one is defensiveness. You say, I'd like to talk to you about something. And
Well, I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for you.
there you go. There it is. Okay, and then stonewalling is often when people just shut down. This is known to be sometimes male gender, but I'll tell you, I'm good at this. There are a lot of women who are good at this. We just go, oh, okay, it's not safe. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop agreeing, acknowledging. I'm just going to go be in the garden for 3 days, and I'll be back then, okay?
You might see that at the bottom, a pause is a healthy tool. That's an antidote to stonewalling. Stonewalling is more, you do it to hurt the other person.
Yeah.
To make a statement, I'll let them know, I'm going to give the silent treatment.
Yeah.
I'm going
Lots of times-
I'm going to disappear. I'm going to
That's
abandon,
right.
give them that feeling of abandonment until finally they want me so bad, then I'll come back.
So I will tell you, early on when I did that, that was never in my head. My head was, this is not a safe place to have a differing opinion. And even that wasn't in my head. It was just be quiet, get small, and stop the conflict. But at the cost of it not being it's not healthy. So you notice when you want to do that, I often get couples to say, is there this fulcrum moment where you can use your voice and kindly say, this is what's happening? Or you say, nope, I'm going down that dark hole of pulling my heart away from you. So that we're using communication tools. They're just not words. Do you see what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about. So look at that list. Who is all of them? Raise your hand.
Of the 4
Of these
horsemen.
4, who does all of these poor ways of communicating well?
Occasionally,
This is my
yeah.
hand. I got my hand up. And how many of you know this is my big one? You can pick it out. So, who?
I get
yes,
def-
I
I get
see that
defensive.
hand.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
love that question. I bet.
I wondered where that was.
Yes, we're supposed to check into our flight.
We'll
Thank
just be-
you for
we'll just
saying
have
that.
C or whatever, it
We
doesn't
will
matter.
just trust God
Yeah,
for where we're
thank you.
sitting. You don't. Yeah, please.
I thought it was my
You will
this. I
find
was-
nothing. You will find nothing that will harm you. Yes, thank you. I should probably do it though, because I guess you can own. I know. I'm sorry about that.
While she's checking into our flight,
That was a really good question.
there are a couple of these that might need a little more explanation. So there's entire books on something called the floor. It is so powerful. I mean, in some ways, I've started to believe that maybe the most satisfying thing we have on earth, I mean, sex is great, but this is even better. The most satisfying thing is being heard and known and loved, no matter what you've been heard and known about. And the floor is a tool that helps that happen easier, especially when we'll say this time, when a conversation starts to go north, right? I'll help yeah.
Not south.
We'll disparage the northerners for a moment.
That's right.
Anyway, when it starts to go somewhere that shouldn't go, you can say, hey, could I have the floor, or can I give you the floor? So like one time I was coming in the kitchen and Mindy said something to me that was important to her, and I had my mind on something. I just came in to get some coffee, and I kind of got defensive like I would normally do, and eventually, it's her fault. Anyway, so then I was getting coffee, and I realized, that was a really lousy conversation we just had, and I stopped, and I thought, I should try to do this occasionally. So I stopped, and I said, hey, can we do a redo? I wasn't really listening to you. I want to hear. Wait, can I give you the floor? So you just hand them anything,
Not a sharp kitchen
Phone is a
knife.
really good thing,
Not
yeah.
that.
Can you have the floor? Tell me again, because you really matter to me, and I want to try to understand you, and I want to try to turn off defensiveness and just hear you well. And then she begins to tell me. So she might say, for example, hey, you haven't taken out the garbage, and we agreed to that. Remember in our prior, dividing things up or whatever. And then, or what was the one we thought of that was this morning we were thinking about?
We had a couple in
Oh, yes,
to Marble, and we had counseled people separately for so long, and we needed to counsel these people together. And I'll just say we have very different counseling techniques. And so to get us in the room with this couple, we tried to explain the floor. It's no big deal. But that night, we were like, listen, you are stepping all over me when I'm going a direction. I need you to go with my direction. Well, if you wouldn't take so long going your direction, then okay. And so it was this underlying simmering angst toward each other, but we didn't get it resolved that night. So the next day, we were trying to demonstrate this for that couple, and I looked at him and I said, well, shall we do it? And so we did our real thing in front of them. And we have since heard from them on several occasions and appreciated so much how our brokenness empowered them forward to handle their own.
The way it worked that was crazy was, it was kind of like, well, you step on me, whatever. And then what happens when you hear yourself reflected back? So with the floor, you say what you're going to say. The other person echoes what they think you've heard. It's just active listening. You guys have all learned this technique through the years. So when they echo it back, it's like looking in a mirror. Well, then you get to revise, because now you realize, well, that's not really what I meant. And so we always say whoever has the floor gets to keep revising, changing. It can go a completely different direction because you're trying to get deeper. So all of a sudden I said, well, it's really not about stepping on each other. I said, I think I feel, disrespected. Like I feel like you don't really think I'm very good at this. So even now I start to, and then all of a sudden we've gone from the head, we're going down into the heart. And so the floor often revises downward toward the heart. And all of a sudden you're talking about something that really matters, not what hardly matters up here. But couples will fight about what hardly matters up here on and on and on for weeks, months, years, decades. Yep. And they never hear the other person long enough to start going to that deeper spot. So anyway, the floor is a great tool. Another one very close to it is Adam and Eve. The Eve side, especially for men or for women, but men especially need this to learn. We had a pastor that was sitting, and his wife kept saying, I just don't feel like my husband ever hears me, all that. So we taught him the Eve process. And so with that, you echo, but then you also validate what emotion that other person is probably feeling. You take a guess, and then they get to correct it or whatever. And then you empathize, and the empathize here means especially, hey, we're in this together. You matter, and I'm with you. I don't know how we're going to solve this. I don't know how we get on the same page, but you matter. So that's the EVE.
Could I add something to that? So by validation, that does not mean you have to agree with them.
No.
I know exactly how you're feeling. No, you will never have that response. I guarantee you. Very seldom
Just something
do we
like,
actually know. But we can say,
Go ahead.
this feels really big. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that this is so painful for you.
Yeah.
Wow, could you tell me more about that? And so just do you see how all these things slow it down? I have had couples talking over one another, getting higher and louder and bigger, and one woman stormed out and slammed the door, and we were kind of like, "Whew, okay, we're kind of glad she's gone. Let's have a really good thing now." And then she came back and she was caught. So we need to keep things down here before they get unsafe for us, because when we get unsafe, that's when we respond not well. That's when we respond out of our knee jerk. And most men and women fight, flight, or freeze. That, when you're triggered, like I said, you don't know if a train's coming or if your spouse is about to blow up about the Visa bill. You don't know. Your body responds the exact same way. So once you're at that point and you feel that this yucky thing coming, then you can say, "I'd like to take a pause. Could we set an alarm on our phone, not for the flight check-in, but for 15 minutes. I'm going to walk around the block. I'm going to listen to ZZ Top or worship music or whatever you need at that moment, and you get to do whatever you need. Then let's come down. Let's take a little bit of a pause so that we can gather our thoughts. My husband has to talk to figure out what he's feeling, and I have to be quiet. And that is not a good thing, right? So I get to be me, he gets to be him, and we can either one ask for just a little bit of a break. And if 15 minutes doesn't do it, we can say, how about noon tomorrow? We bring this back up, or our staff meeting. So we have to keep it out of that. We are escalating thing. Once you're there, you're done. You are done. The train is coming and it's about to hit you, and that's how it feels. And for lots of times, I read this several months back, that especially for men, when they get that elevated affect that is so high, it can often take 24 hours to regulate it. So take that into consideration.
We find that a lot of women need to sleep.
I know, that's
need to sleep once before.
And by a lot of women, he means me.
No.
That
it comes up in the counseling room pretty often too, though. Yeah.
I just need to sleep on it.
Until they've slept, and then the next day they're like, oh, I'm different. I can, I'm only going to mention two others. The Adam thing. These are basically just an application of egregious principles that come from Paul's principles in Ephesians 6. Men especially need respect. Women especially need to be loved. And there's some crazy research out there about that, but we won't take the time on that right now. But anyway, the scripture has really been backed up even by science. So Adam, this idea of women just learning to, so have a list somewhere of things they admire about their husband and being able to kind of do that. And for men, being able to be tender and validate those emotions and what they're going through. And so that's one of those tools. The other one there that comes back to us very often as being sort of like we hear back, reflection back, is the scale. And really that helps with what we were talking about this morning about how we tend to be hero zero, all or nothing, always, and the scale is a values thing that you say, hey, this is a 3 for me. Because sometimes we're fighting over stuff and one's a 4 and the other's a 3. And once you can quantify, you're like, oh, we're like almost on the same page. And so you do it, you end up at the wrong restaurant that nobody wanted to go to because one, you didn't value it, or like one time I was wanting Mindy to come along with me on a trip, and I said, I think I've only done this maybe one time. I said, I've been praying, I think it's a 9 for you to come with me on this trip, but you have freedom. And I will not be frustrated with you at all if you choose not to. But this is, as I've prayed about, I think it's really, and so it took her 3 days, and she came back 3 days later. Okay, God told me that I should go. I think I'm supposed to go. And it turned out to be a very special thing, but it may not have, who knew it was going to be or not. But anyway, we're able to communicate value levels with that scale, and that one has seemed to be an especially helpful tool.
It's really good.
I think any of these others, you can ask us questions if you're interested.
Any questions? Okay, good. Time's up. No more question space. Okay. All right. I'm going to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. All right. What's next?
What?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We'll get these out. And then
Okay,
You can, yeah.
is that what you want to do? We do have copies of this really,
Maybe I'll just put that one
really
up here on the-
great tool, because that's what you get for coming
Grab
to
that
the
after, yeah.
webinar afterwards. Okay, great.
We have
Yeah,
another.
that's you.
We have another tool that we've used it often enough that we decided to put this in here. This one we don't have one for everybody, so we're gonna have to ask you just to pass it around and take a look at it. But one of the things that sometimes has been helpful, just look at it, pass it along. For couples to ask for what they need, and so sometimes this is a really easy tool. That's one reason we brought it to, because you can find it online easy. Just go to Harley and put in the word Harley and then put emotional needs questionnaire, and it'll pop up, and he says you can print this out for free. And couples will do it. What they do is separately they decide, here's my top 5 needs, but they're in order. So if I only had one need in my marriage that was going to be met, this is the one I'm asking for. And if I had 2, this would be the second, the third. So then you just have them talk to one another, walk it through. And it seems to be very renewing, because sometimes it feels like our spouse needs way more than we could ever do, right? Mm-hmm. And and there's just all this angst, and when you make it really clear, very practical, then all of a sudden it's like, I can do that, or I can't, but at least it's clear now. And anyway, that's been a very helpful tool.
How many of you have said, I just need my spouse to love me better? That's not vague and ambiguous at all, is it, right? Okay, so does that mean you want fresh flowers once a week? Do you want them to unload the dishwasher, fold the laundry, go on a bike ride with you, take you out on a date? What does love look like to you? That's why we love this little questionnaire, because sometimes we don't even know. Like, I will ask spouses to be clear, and they can't. One of my last couples, she's busy. She's homeschooling. They live with his parents. They're in a transition. It's terrible. Life is hard. He just wants her to come sit down by him. And she's like, okay, for how long? How long do you need? What, 15 minutes? 15 minutes, is that enough? Does that mean like sit on the armchair with you in that recliner? Okay, so those are really valid questions. And he had to come up with some answers. And she wants him to just turn toward her and have a connecting conversation. And he is like, for how long? How long do I have to do that? What does that look like? And so we just say the words, people. Say the words. Brené Brown says, just say, here's the story I'm telling myself. I don't think you really want to be with me because you are so busy. That's what this man was saying. I just want my wife back. And she's like, I just want some help with the laundry and homeschooling. So we then wrestle with all of that because those are both valid needs. Yes? Okay.
Sometimes couples are very, very surprised by what's up on the list.
They are. It's true.
Yeah. You know, the sex question, where it lands, sometimes is really out of kilter from what the other person thought. Mm-hmm. And like one guy, he said, hey, if I only had one and I could live with this, I need admiration. My life's so different when I feel admired, loved. And you know, if you did that one thing about 10 to 20 times a day, you could not. I would be okay if you didn't meet any of my other needs. And I thought, okay, well, he's very clear. Yeah, you know what he. So, yeah.
Yes.
It sounds needy, but in some ways it was really simple.
Right.
Yeah,
It
like
was.
okay,
That's
yeah,
exactly
I can do that.
right.
So.
Yeah, and I think the sex question is always a potential landmine because women think their husbands want sex about 5 times a day, and the husband's like, I don't know, once or twice a week, I'm good, and they go, what? Seriously? That's enough?
Or the other way around sometimes.
And sometimes the women are saying, yeah, maybe every other day. And the husband's like, oh, are you kidding me? Okay.
Right.
And so here is what I've learned. I've learned there is oftentimes one super responsible partner and the one who brings the party. In your marriage, is it that way? Lots of times it is, and that rarely coincides well, by the way. It just doesn't. And so Those are things you have to navigate. 69%, remember that. Okay,
This was
another
the
good one.
This is the last tool if you want to mention it, and then we're
Okay,
done. Yeah, with the
so
tools.
we feel like, personally, I think our Dr.
This is probably one per
would
couple.
agree that if you look at Genesis, right after the fall, Moses or whoever you feel like theologically wrote Genesis, he says, right before the fall, they were naked and not what? Ashamed. He could have said anything. They were naked and super happy. They were naked and dancing around. They were naked and enjoying some coffee on the lawn. I don't know. He could have said a bunch of stuff, but he didn't. He said they were naked and not ashamed. But as soon as sin entered the world, shame did too. And what does shame cause us to do? Run and hide. That's right. So shame is the driver for almost every dysfunction that we all live with. It is the thing that causes couples to hide from each other. And I just am sorry to tell you that the antidote for shame is vulnerability. So you just say, along with my Eagle brand milk, that standing in front of the mirror makes me think you're thinking, oh my God, my wife's a cow. And he is not thinking that. He says to me, I promise I'm not thinking that, but those are in my head. So if I say it, guess what it does? It calms it down. If you don't say it, it becomes a ruminating, massive tsunami of awful in your head. But if you say it and your spouse, you want them to be honest, right? Like my husband says, so I think you think that as we've lost a little percentage on our investments, I'm like, are you serious? You think those words are in my head? I don't even think investments ever. And when you want to talk about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to take? And so, but if he didn't say it, I couldn't refute it. If I don't say it, he can't go, occasionally I think that, because I want the truth, people. I don't want to lie. I don't want him to say, oh, I never noticed any beauty around me other than you. That's not true. Look in this room. How can you not see all the beauty in this room? I want you to, but I want the truth. We really and truly want the truth. But you have to say the words. Do you agree? Is it hard? Oh, man, is it ever. Vulnerability is like me standing up here right now with nothing on. That's exactly how it feels. You just want to be like, oh, I don't know. Is this really going to work? Is this going to work? And it does. It makes you like each other more.
So Brene Brown is one of the great researchers on this. She is a believer. Her books aren't written from a biblical or Christian point of view at all. She's a researcher, and I don't even know when she came to faith exactly, but most of her knowledge comes out of exegeting creation, looking at data of what we do. But shame has been her area of study. At one point, her YouTube was her TED Talk was the #1 TED Talk in the world. It's still, I think, in the top 10 all these years later. And anyway, she's a great writer on this subject of shame and vulnerability. A lot of other great writers. I love Kurt Thompson and others, but I recommend if you get a chance to go through this, and it says things like, what does shame smell like? What does it feel like? What it's trying to do is help you notice in your own soul, like when shame starts, so that you can begin to not to react to it, begin to maybe respond and go, wow, this is that shame thing, trying to make me do something, trying to make me perform, trying to make me live up to some fake, sense of who I am, rather than just being real. And so her point is there, you try to figure out what are those areas where you tend to feel ashamed because you're not living up to your ideal self. And where are those, and then how's it feel, so you begin to notice it much quicker so that you can sort of shut down and go, no, shame, you don't get to win. I'm under the cross, man. I'm under the blood of the Lamb. I'm loved. I am 100% loved. I am fully accepted. I'm in the beloved. And shame, you don't get to run my life. And so once, with sin, Kurt Thompson makes the case that probably what tempted Eve was shame. So shame came more after she was ashamed, but it was her sense that she didn't measure up, and the enemy's going, hey, you need to eat of that tree because then you'll be like God. Because shame is the feeling that we don't measure up and that we might be abandoned, or we probably deserve to be rejected or abandoned. So that feeling is what shame is. And so Eve had that feeling, so she thought, well, I got to eat of the tree. That way I don't need God, because I'm going to, even if he abandoned me, I'm fine, because I'm going to be able to know what he knows. And then, of course, shame rushed into the garden, and ever since it's motivated so much of our foolish behavior, so much of our sin. And so it's an area that we have to work
caused
in.
us to become isolated.
Yeah, so there's
And
more
go
work
and
that
hide.
can be done on that, but in marriage,
Yes.
it is a key area, because our shame is what makes us so often not able to do something like these great communication tools, because shame is being activated, and then when we want to listen, we don't want to listen because we get defensive because of shame. We have to be right because of shame. So anyway, that's a key area.
One last closing story, and then we'd love to hear your questions. I had a client who had just been consecrated in a certain denomination, in a very high position, and you don't get that without being super smart. And so the second day, I'll never forget, I said to him, I thought, oh my gosh, I was just reaching for vocabulary I haven't used in a really long time, trying to sound smart, right? And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to be super honest with you right now. It was important to me. We were talking about shame. It was really important to me that you thought I was not foolish, but that I was smart. And I thank you for being a safe place to say that and be authentic. And he said, I'll be really honest with you. And then we went to some deep, deep places. But here's what he said. I had determined when I walked in this door, if you weren't honest and transparent with me, I was going home. And I thought, wow, thanks for saying that. And that mutual mirrored, kind place to be human caused us to go to the sweetest, healing, deep, wounded, bullying places. And he said, I've never shared this with any other human. And I feel so honored, but I had to share my junk too. You guys, we can't be pretty all the time. We just can't. Agape love is a man beaten and scraped and wounded and thorned and nailed. That's agape love. It is not always pretty, but it's raw. Okay, that's all.
All right, Mike, could you jump up here with us maybe? And we'll leave this one on because we'll just switch to this. I'll turn this other one off. And questions. And we'll need to repeat your questions, so I guess for the video. Could you hold that for a second?
Sweet, let's go.
Nothing's off limits. Well,
I want to answer that because he gets to be sad. Okay, here's the question. When we did the scale on that, really, here's the bottom line. He wanted me to go visit a family member that wasn't a great fan of me yet. And it's stressful, it's painful. I could hardly wait for him to be gone a week. As an introvert, I was counting the days and thinking, oh, thank you, God. Okay, and then he comes to me with that. And I'll tell you, the only time he's ever used a 9 was in this case. We don't abuse this. And so the thing is, he could have been sad and mad and angry. We get to do that. We still get to have emotions.
yeah, so her question was, how would I manage giving her freedom? And so I guess over time, that belief in freedom. is just so high. I need her to grant me freedom, and I need to grant her freedom. And what we've learned from counseling and from the literature and from God's word is just every time we take just a little bit of someone's freedom away against their will, love diminishes. If you believe, Harley likes to call it the love bank. We sort of all have this love bank. So I don't want to use up my love bank. I've worked hard for her to feel loved, so I'm not very good at it sometimes. So so granting her freedom is also to my best interest as well, even though it might not be in this one event. In the whole, I love having a happy wife who's very empowered, very free, and then so that helps me. Just knowing that there's a bigger picture. One's the short run gain, and one's the long term gain, and the long term gain is freedom. What else?
I have an example of that.
Yes.
Just this summer. We're married 40 years. Okay. One of the skills we learned is that freedom. So we had a situation come up where I had calendared off the whole month of July to have double cataracts done. And we had agreed on that. And then all of a sudden, a major event came up in his family in Minnesota. We need to be there, he says. And I said, but wait a minute. We had agreed on this months before. I've got it scheduled. I won't go. And our compromise was, but you have the freedom to go. I'm perfectly okay doing this by myself. You go. So he chose to go, and he booked 12 days. And I'm like, 12 days? It's one day's event. Why would you go that long and leave me at home doing this by myself? And so he booked it, and all the time I'm going, man, 12 days, I really miss him. And our life is not the same as when we're not together. And I just prayed on it and let it go. And by time day 8 or 9 was coming around, he's like, boy, why did I choose 12 days to be gone for this one day event? And so we came back together very enriched by the experience of me saying, you can go. I did my limit saying I won't go because we had already agreed that I would get this done, so forth.
Beautiful, beautiful example. Other questions? What's the biggest marriage dilemma that you run into when you're either caring for people or maybe even your own marriage? Yeah. That's why the Gottman stuff's so helpful. Yeah, you've got to want to communicate, and Gottman doesn't do anything about that. But he does help you learn some rails to run down that can protect from doing damage to one another.
One of the things I've run across in my own time in the ministry and working with pastors is there's sometimes some resentment for the amount of time that pastors and leadership people put into their ministry, and it takes away from time with the family.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of those places where we kind of use that other tool, the very first one we gave you there, the one that has the 15 hours. And when we say to pastors, can you turn the dial from 2 hours a week toward 15 hours? And tell your elders, tell your team, you need 15 hours if you want to have a sustainable marriage and be their pastor years into the future. This is just normal, what normal marriages need. And then show them on your calendar. You can use that calendar to show them, this is what my life is like as a pastor. This is how much time I get. And then they'll go, wow, yeah, I get 4-day weekends. I get every weekend. I get 2 days off every week. I get, and all of a sudden they realize maybe the difference. And so then that can sort of help the pastor be empowered to do what he needs to do for his marriage instead of feeling like he has to just keep pleasing everybody and saying yes, yes, yes to everything.
Do you want to add something to that?
A lot of what the Crowders have been teaching us is things that ministry couples need to do. And what you're hitting on is I think the biggest challenge is really setting aside that time to do these things in your marriage. Yes, we all need to be doing these things. And I know for my wife and I, both being in full-time ministry, it's a constant battle. And we'll get it worked out, and then the next thing comes up, the next project, the next deadline, we get ourselves in over our heads. Then we got to work out of it again. And then the next thing. And one of the biggest lies I hear pastors saying is, this is just a season. You know, just a season. And they tell their spouse that. This is just a season. You know, we got this building thing going on, just to see. Oh, we're launching a new program. It's just a season. Oh, you know, we're doing this new class. It's just a season. Oh, I'm training the elders right now. It's just a season. And then 20 years go by and they never got out of, this is just a season. And then by that time, their spouse is very angry and hurt and doesn't even want to go to the church anymore. You know, so I think, you know, one of the challenges for all of us, because we are passionate about ministry. We love doing what we do. And one of the challenges, though, will I, you know, if I'm the pastor, you know, or if I'm helping those in ministry, or even in our ministry to helping those, will I make this a priority or not? And there's a whole lot of reasons we don't do it. There's some good reasons we don't do that, meaning our passion, devotion, wanting to serve the best we can. But there's also some other reasons that we have to feel needed and be successful and all those kinds of things that then we don't take the time to do these kind of things. And, you know, so my wife and I, you know, we had a pretty good fight earlier this week. And what it came down to was just not taking the time to talk. And I think it was George Bernard Shaw said something to the effect of, the biggest problem with communication is assuming it happened. And that's true. And that's what our fight was about. I thought she knew something. She thought I knew something. Neither of us knew what the other person was assuming. And then it turns into this big thing, and it would have just taken doing a couple of these things. And why didn't we do it? Too busy. We were just too busy to sit down and have that conversation. And it's fine. We repaired well. We know how to do this thing, you know. But we still are shocked, like, what? It happened again? Like, we've been married 20 years and we're doing this again, and we've got to repair again. And, you know, good couples don't ever get it perfect. Good couples repair well, you know. And so, you know, but there's that constant battle, you know, as I am running up the stairs to get a few Marble Retreat things done, to get back down here for this workshop, not knowing how much I would be helping out. I'm saying in my head, ruthlessly eliminate, hurry, running up the stairs. I got to get in. I got to get into my room. I got to get these couple of emails done. And then I got to get back down here so I can help with this. Then I got to get from here to prepare for tonight's talk, because I'm not done with it yet, by the way. And then I'm like, ruthlessly eliminate, hurry. I'm too out of breath to even say those words, you know. It's hard. It's a constant battle. But we see marriage after marriage failing in ministry. Failing. And the people out there in the world are saying, how come pastors get divorced as often as secular folks? Maybe not quite as often, but it's up there. And a lot of it is because there's that constant battle, and we often lose it, you know, of not prioritizing our marriage. And I think that's a big part of the wrestling. You know, this stuff is all clearly good for you. It's like eating your vegetables. You know, it's like it's good for you, but will I take the time to do it, you know, is part of the challenge for those folks in ministry.
I like that. I see that hand.
So, strong introvert, I hear resonating with you talking about that time being away. And this morning you talked about what percentage of pastors are
Yeah, a large. Mm-hmm.
So you got the 15 hours with your spouse. Is there a number of hours just for yourself?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, go for it.
So if you've got 15 hours for your spouse, and then if you have children or whatever, and then you've got your job, you know, is there time for yourself as an introvert? You know, like what about working out or playing some golf or reading a book or just getting some downtime? You know, I think that's so crucial, and it's another area that pastors have to learn to have vacation down. You know, one of the starts is Sabbath. Thank God for the younger generation, kind of 40s and down. They've learned to go, because you know what? They're really a presage for the whole world. So you know how God's always working in different generations. This generation right now is starting to live like pastors live. Everybody is 365. They're doing their email day and night. They're all living a pastor's type job now, where there's no boundaries. They don't work 8 to 5 anymore. They kind of work from morning to night because of the way the digital life has become. So the need for Sabbath is crucial. This idea of making a day holy for restoration, for alone time, for some family time perhaps. And so finding a pathway, I think I mentioned this one, John Mark Comer is one of the better writers on Sabbath, or better talkers if you listen to his YouTubes or his podcast. Fantastic teaching. But the idea of Sabbath, the idea of every Monday morning when I was, for years, I would work out, because I had to keep that holy or it would never happen, and just I needed that. It was good for my soul. I will say one thing about Sabbath that we found helpful. This is kind of a trick for pastors in particular, and I call it banking 52 Sabbaths. And so you can use like on Google Calendar or whatever calendar you're using, put the Sabbath on there, and then if something steals your Sabbath, you bank it forward. So you just grab it and you pull it forward on your calendar to another spot. And so you say to your elders or your leaders, I'm going to have 52 Sabbaths because I believe it's a biblical idea. And sometimes that's going to mean because of what happened, I have to do a wedding, I have to do things, things that come up, I have to do a funeral, whatever. I'm just going to have to move my Sabbath forward. It's going to look like I'm taking a 4-day weekend, but I'm really even not. I'm just taking 4 Sabbaths that I've missed over the last 3 months. And that's been a really helpful tool for pastors to sort of make sure that they keep those places holy. I think you could do it beyond Sabbath and other areas of self-care. You could kind of bank it and then move it forward when it gets stolen because of the type of job that a pastor does.
What we've found that works is to have a conversation about our Sabbath for that week. Mm-hmm. Do you need to do it separately? Do you need to do it? Do you want to do it together? Do you have the grace to do it together? We used to go on long bike rides and listen to the same audiobook. So, and by long, I mean long. So for when we lived in Southern California at a lower altitude, we could ride 100 miles in one day or 80 miles in one day, and it was flat mostly. We'd go to the beach, have a bite to eat, but we would still get alone time on our own bicycle. And then find some, like even if we had to stop for whatever, we would say, oh my goodness, did you just hear that? And we would have some connection points over what we were hearing. And so then we kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But also, I need about 3 days at a monastery by myself. So I have to ask for it. I have to request it. I have to say, would that work? I'd like to put that on the calendar. And so I put it on the calendar, and so empowering to me to do that. So you get to know you, and you get to ask for what you need. And sometimes it's not popular with our spouse, but sometimes we got to be okay with them not being okay with us. Right? Is that right? Is anyone ever okay with your spouse all the time? No, that's not realistic. So sometimes we're going to disappoint them, but we need it. As introverts, we need to have no more words and no more people in our space. You know what I mean? Hallelujah. Okay, yes, I see that hand.
So what does a Sabbath look like? Does it always have to be similar? Give me an idea of how you arrive at the Sabbath and what you're going to use that time.
So his question was, what does the Sabbath look like? So it can look like anything you want. One of the things we like to say is I think God prefers we don't have, and pardon me, a bastard Sabbath, a fun day without God.
The Father needs to be there somewhere.
He does. So it is somehow we're connecting with God. Hopefully we're connecting with each other. Our Jewish friends feel like it's not a Sabbath if you don't have sex. So you probably, high five to that. That's right. And so you get to talk about it. And so even with your date nights, like I suggest to people, you schedule 2 nights a month and your spouse schedules 2 nights a month. So it doesn't all fall on one person to creatively plan your date nights. So with the Sabbath, you say, okay, we're pretty spent. What do you need on Friday? What do you need Friday to look like? So we
We're
have a
actually cleaning up this
conversation.
coming Friday,
We
yeah.
were talking last night, so we might need 2 days this week, and we shouldn't plan any more appointments.
Yeah,
So,
bank some Sabbath.
but we talk about it, right? And it can look like anything you want it to. 8 hours of Netflix is not a Sabbath. I just want to put that out there, okay? It's just not, because at the end of it, you are not refreshed.
I agree.
Did we answer that question? You sure?
It's about rest, rejuvenation, connection. So I think it's good to have it different. I mean, I think there's good to have some rhythms, but sometimes you're in a different place, you need different things. But God has given us that day to heal. I was working with a pastor. He was actually in our doctoral class, and he called the elders together, and he said, I've been breaking one of the 10 Commandments, so we need to call a meeting. And he didn't tell them. So they come in, and they're like waiting, what's he going to say? He said, I don't keep the Sabbath. They're like, that's okay. That's fine. And that's what we do. Largely in a lot of our denominations, that's what we do. It's fine. It's fine. And we just kind of push that one off the side, Yeah, it's interesting, but God has given us that, and it's necessary. How much time do we have anyway?
I think we're about there, aren't we?
2:38.
Okay, I didn't know, I couldn't remember if it went to 2:30 or 2:45 or.
So how did you not feel pressure when he said a 9?
I did in my head, I was like, crap. Okay, that's what I said. Probably, I hope that's what I said. And so I was like,
Probably the other
okay,
version of that.
because he never uses it, right? He never uses it. So that's how I had to go, okay, I'm paying attention. This matters. This matters to me. This matters to him. This matters to both of us. I wasn't a 9. Well, maybe almost a 9 on having a week by myself, but that got my attention, so I noticed. And so then rather than digging my heels in, because I really wanted the first couple of days, I was like, I'm not going on that trip. Are you kidding me? And then I thought maybe I should pray about it. And it really did end up to be a pivotal moment in my relationship with what is our oldest child, but came from another woman with my husband. So it really has, we just left them. I could not have asked for a sweeter time when we walked in. She hugged me for like 30 seconds. I'm a nice person. I've always thought, why don't you like me? I'm a nice person, okay? But I don't want to be a nice person. I want to be real with her. And I never asked for a step parent growing up, neither did she. So I've always been a step back, giving her lots of wide berth. But it probably gave too much, and I used it as an excuse to not feel close to her, in all honesty. And now it is unbelievably sweet because my husband had the guts to ask me for something he knew I did not want to do. We get that. If you get nothing else, get no and ask for what you need. And freedom.
Yes.
As we're working with pastors and encouraging them to spend these 15 quality hours with their spouse and to incorporate a regular Sabbath into their routine, and they get on board and say, this is a great idea, and they go back home to their home church and communicate that as something healthy for them and their family and their ministry, and it's not received. How are boards receiving that, and how do you encourage us to encourage them to work through that, not being received by their churches?
Yeah, I think it could take a while to bring a team on board, but I think there's so many great tools out there, so many good teachings that maybe you could get the elders paying attention to, doing scriptural study, thinking it through, listening to John Mark Comer, listening to Peter Scazzaro, maybe doing something like Mostly Healthy Church together. So you could think of it more of a process. But also there comes a time, we had a young leader that's just unbelievable. He and his wife are unbelievable. But, his pastor would not allow them to have Sabbath. And they basically came to the place, they said, look, we know, we can't sustain this without Sabbath. So we need to start looking for another location, and they just had to draw the line and at some point say, we're okay with trying to figure out a way to move toward this, but we know internally that we cannot have the marriage we want, love our kids the way we want, live the life that we need to live before God without working out the Sabbath. And their pastor was an old school, like, no, I never got Sabbath, and you just work harder, and you just, and this is part of it, you're a young pastor, just, and they just drew a line, and I encouraged them to. I said, draw a line, figure out what hill you're willing to die on. If this is it, then do it.
You have to change the culture. I see that hand. Did you want to say anything to that? Okay. Yeah, I think you did.
Oh, I was and this is a little bit of repeat, but of course, every time you guys ask a question, I got all these pastors popping into my head. And then one of the most recent ones I worked with, he went back, called a 2-day elder camp meeting, and just laid out what we're talking about to them, like, I can't keep going at this pace, and we need to make some changes. He had been in a quickly growing church, and it was always expected that the senior pastor would do every wedding, every funeral, every hospital visit, that kind of thing. But the church is a size that's just not realistic, and he's fried, he's going to be gone, but he's very gifted, talented, and so he was just very honest with them. But he said it was 2 days of wrestling because they didn't want to go back. So one thing that we encourage pastors to do is get leadership on board first. And as Patrick said, that can be a process. And this guy said it was a 2-day wrestling match until they finally came around and said, yeah, we're here to protect you. Then we have the elders or leadership, whatever it looks like in your denomination, communicate that to the congregation, not the pastor. Yeah. Not the pastor. They get up and say, we're making some changes. He's going to now do 6 weddings a year. He's going to do 6 funerals a year. He's going to get his weekends off, what I mean by weekends, not real weekends, but you know what I mean. He's going to get his Sabbath. And so I think those are keys, but sometimes they'll dig in. And like Patrick said, then, I said to this guy, but he was going to be gone anyway if he kept going the way he was. But he's fearful they'll fire me. If I make these changes. I'm like, well, you're telling me you're going to quit anyway. So try. And they came around, and he just contacted me. It was about a year ago. I worked with him a little over a year ago. And it's going so well. And he thought, there's no way they'll change. This culture will not change. And they did. A lot of people, I'm sure there's some annoyed people because they don't get the senior pastor for their daughter's wedding or whatever, But overall, they're like, this is the new normal, and we'd rather have him here than be gone, And plus, they've seen him come alive. He's rejuvenated, he's passionate, he's got more energy. So, but start with leadership, and that could be a process. There's lots of research to back up all this stuff, and then have leadership communicate that to the congregation.
No, keep that.
Here, wait, right behind you, there is a lady with a question.
So I just wonder, marriage is obviously important, and having healthy marriage is obviously important. And we're also talking about Sabbath rest. And so just, is there a resource that you guys would recommend for just communicating the whole person and how to be healthy holistically as a person?
I would maybe start with Pete Scazzaro. Emotionally healthy spirituality, probably start there, and then emotionally healthy leader. Both of those do a really good job of laying out the case biblically and even psychologically, and blending those things together. But then in the context of a church, if you don't know Pete Scazzaro's story, he's pastored a church that grew up, I think it was over 1,000, maybe a couple thousand. And one day his wife said to him, Pete, I love you. I'm not going anywhere, but I will not be attending this church any longer. It's way too toxic. And that was his big wake-up call. And he started realizing, well, we memorize Scripture, we quote Scripture, we preach the Word, people getting saved, people from all these different nations, we're doing missions all over the world. What is wrong with my church? And he realized, he said, we know Jesus, but he said, Grandpa's in our bones, and that there's this whole side of us that we've not really applied the gospel to. and looked beyond the salvation message, to the transformation that's needed to be healthy. So anyway, then those things have flowed into his books, Most Healthy Church. So he's a great start. A younger voice is John Mark Comer, and those guys are both holistic toward marriage, spiritual life, church life, and they speak in terms of the Bible. So they're a really good resource. Yes.
I want to share with you something that we see in our facility, and it's very encouraging.
Okay.
Because it's also very, very simple. We have seen denominations now stepping up to the plate and saying, you pastors need and you will take sabbatical. So it's started with senior pastors. Now, what we're finding out is these senior pastors are going back to their staff and saying, you will take a sabbatical. And it's happening more and more and more. And so we're so encouraged by that.
Yeah, the amazing thing too, I mentioned earlier, when we obey this as ministers, and we're the ones that are sometimes empowering and helping those ministers do that, it is what the country is needing, right? It's what the world is needing right now. There are books, a lot of books out there, secular books right now, on the idea of Sabbath and sabbatical. One called Pause by somebody from, Apple or one of the, anyway. There's a number of books nowadays that are being written because the rest of the world is also starting to live the kind of life pastors are. So when pastors do this, it's very attractional to today. It's preaching the gospel in a way that right now is the need of the community around us. They don't know how to rest. They don't know how to stop. And they, have better, vacations and things perhaps, but still they're having the same struggle. So we're leading by example. So it really is kind of a prophetic moment as well in the church. I bet we're out of time.
We're done. We're over.
Yeah.
We're over the time.
Can you pray for everyone?
Yes. Lord, you're so sweet for us. You are so kind to us. Thank you for the grace that you give us to be married and to minister together and alongside each other, to operate in our strengths and have grace for our weaknesses. Lord, thank you that our limitations keep us leaning on you. So, Father, do with all of these words what you wish in each of our souls. And we just thank you. I thank you for every person in this caregiver organization. What a precious group of people. What an honor. Lord, be glorified. In Christ's holy name, amen.
Remember, if you